All right, and with us right now, we've got Scott Tarcy. And Scott, you're the owner of CAD Design Help.com. You're an inventor, engineer, and you're the host of The Engineering Entrepreneur. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks for having me.
So, Scott, give me a little background on how you got into engineering, and we'll then from there we'll discuss how you became a media personality in this field.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting story. So from high school, I was pretty good at math and science, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do in college. But my dad was an engineer; he basically talked me into it. Didn't really have a passion for it, I would say, at the time, but that's what I did. And then when I graduated, I started working a corporate job as a design engineer. So my first job was actually designing, like, imagine like an outdoor pump or outdoor pond for fish or aquariums inside. But primarily, I was on the outside stuff. And so I would design these pumps and various koi pond products. And then from there, I went to a different company and designed dishwashers. And that was fine, but I didn't like that lifestyle particularly of, working 9 to 5 or more like 8 to 6. I had to go to a lot of meetings. I liked the design part. I really started to like actually doing the CAD and and figuring problem solving, but I spent a lot of time in meetings. So I was really motivated by the 4-Hour Work Week and a couple of podcasts I found, the Tropical MBA podcast. These guys are essentially location independent entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Because they do what they want. They work the projects they want and they work the hours they want. So I started this on the side. One of the other books was the $100 Startup. And it was basically like, can you take a skill that you have a passion for, and will people pay you for it? And I was able to find a group in Charlotte where I live called the Inventors Network of the Carolinas. And so this is my client base. This is the people that need me, and I can help them, because an inventor needs a CAD design first and then a prototype to kind of test it out. And then from then they can go further into manufacturing. And so when I went to this meeting, I got my first client there who had an existing thing, like invention of some, I can't remember what it was, something with retail. But he had a previous engineer quit working for him, and I was able to pick it up and finish it. And that's kind of how I got started. I did it on the side for about 6 months, built up to the business where I was working like 80 hours a week between my full-time job and this side job. And I just got the point. It's like, I got to choose one or the other. I can't sustain this work. 80 hours a week, I can't keep it up. So I chose my side hustle because that's really where the passion was. And I noticed immediately, once I had that extra 40 hours free, I could grow the business exponentially. And I equaled my salary in the first year, which is pretty rare. The podcasts that I've heard in the past talk about needing 3 years of full-time effort to equal your salary. And I did it in 1. And then I was able to double and then triple my salary in years since. And then it's been pretty sustainable.
So, essentially, you definitely started your own business. You're kind of acting as a freelancer, right?
I am, but I'm more than that, because if I did all the work myself, I would be a pure freelancer. I also hire people. It's the only way I could scale this. Well, another thing I noticed, once I had the 40 hours, I could land more projects. But then I got to the point where I can only do so much.
Right.
I can't land anymore. So I've hired 5 people since then. And that's where I've scaled it.
I'm thinking about that first year, however, and I run into this a lot, and people talk about, well, what businesses are maybe less risky to start. And
sure.
I'd say, as you may have this grand vision for what it is that you want to create, and you want to have, 40 people on the team, and you want to have office space, and you want to be, in stores nationwide and that sort of thing. Well, starting a business like that right out of the gate, that's really hard to do. However, take what you're really good at professionally and offer those services individually. That's a great way to get the ball rolling.
That's
work
exactly
as, in many ways, as a freelancer, at the kind of the lifestyle business level. You don't have to worry about a bunch of overhead. You don't need to necessarily bring in, 5 to 10 employees on day one. Now you can get there if you want to. And I think, case in point, what you did, your pattern is you got too busy. And then you realized, listen, I got a bottleneck right here where I can't expand until I bring somebody else on. And so it's almost like, let the business and income decide your next steps based on, your number one job is just, getting new business and then fulfilling that business and then kind of going from there. Does that sound about right?
Exactly. There was a lot of thoughts I had of different. The ultimate goal was to basically free up my lifestyle. That was my goal, and there was many ways to do it. But you're exactly right. The lowest barrier to entry, the lowest upfront cost, was just providing a service business, not trying to create a product and it's lower risk too. So, yeah, I mean, the upfront cost really was almost zero outside of like getting a domain name, a website.
Right.
I did have to get the professional software. When I first started, I was just using kind of this free engineering software, which wasn't very good. But the reason I did that was because I wasn't sure if I was going to ever scale it enough to justify the very expensive professional level. And then once I started realizing how much better, because I had used the professional level at my day job, the SolidWorks software, which is very expensive, but I was so much better at it. It was just, you get what you pay for. And so once I had done some work for a while, I was like, okay, it's worth investing in that software. And it's kind of gone ever that way since. Like when I first started, I didn't have any 3D printers, and I would outsource this because the machines themselves are thousands of dollars up front. But as I noticed that everybody I did design work for really wanted a physical prototype, and I kept outsourcing this, and yeah, I'd mark it up a little bit, but I didn't make the most of the money. The guy I was sourcing it to was making the most. I said, if I bring this in, I can see the payback in a couple of months. And it was absolutely the case. I had some failures. I had some machines I bought that I thought were good that ultimately didn't work out, and I lost some money there. But in the long run, I really have made back on that investment. So I guess my advice to people would be like, tread carefully. Don't throw all your money in at once. But if you're outsourcing something and you can see that you can bring it in and make that money back on your investment, like it makes business sense to do it. And that's kind of how I've always approached things. I'm very, I guess, financially conservative when it comes to taking on the next thing. But if I can see that it's going to work out or has a high probability, I'm also not so risk averse that I won't try it.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing as well.
Scott, who hires a freelance CAD designer?
So my clients range from individual inventors, which is a lot of them. I've had clients that have made it on the Shark Tank and actually gotten investments. So various consumer products. I have businesses that just need drawings done sometimes. They have a machine they just need a drawing of for their supplier. That can happen. Sometimes people just need a lot of parts printed out for whatever reason. Sometimes they have a file and I just make it. Sometimes they need it made. It could be, I've even done very large projects with other engineers where we put together like a whole test system for like an assembly line. So there's a large range of people that have hired me for various projects.
Yeah, and where do you find all of your clients?
So that's a good question. When I first started, I just launched a website and said, oh, they'll just come to me. And that didn't happen. For 2 years, nothing happened actually with my website. So my first client came from actually in-person networking, and I still do this today. I think in-person networking is huge. I never put that. I would never say, hey, just try to do everything online, because the value of a face-to-face meeting is I think very important. But yeah, the first clients came from an inventors group where there was a bunch of people there that had their inventions and they needed some support. And since I met them all in person, I was getting all that work. But I really needed to go full time. I needed to scale, so I did go online. I tried Upwork, didn't have a lot of success with that site.
Yeah.
Are you still there? Can you hear me?
I sure am. Yeah.
I can't hear you for some reason. Okay, wait. How about now? Josh?
Yeah.
Okay, I got to get my audio cable fixed. Okay, well, I was left off. Yeah, so once I had kind of maxed out my in-person network, the website that actually worked the best was this one called Thumbtack. And I like the way that they charge for the leads, because they just charge a flat fee of like $5 for my industry. Now, it can vary. The guy I hired for my website told me that his leads were like $20 a pop, so quite a bit more. But ultimately, that's the site that I've probably gotten 60% of my revenue from directly. And then as my website has done better with my own marketing efforts of doing blogs, Cure.com, where you can answer people's questions related to your industry, is a really good one. I've answered a bunch of questions there, and I've gotten definitely some hires directly from that. And then also my podcast has been nice, and I really enjoyed doing the podcast because I can really talk to some other interesting people in my industry, other inventors, other engineers, and really learn some valuable things. And then obviously my audience can learn as well.
Tell me more about why you started the podcast, because a podcast can be a lot of work. So obviously,
It is a lot of
as
work,
you looked at
absolutely.
doing that, you had a business plan around that. So I guess kind of explain why you took that step.
A couple of reasons. One of them really was I couldn't find a podcast that was really doing what I was doing. I couldn't find one, and maybe there was one back in the day 4 years ago when I started it, but I couldn't find it easily enough that was basically an engineer like myself who became an entrepreneur. I've never found another one like it. So I said, I'm going to go make it. And that's what I did. And, I told my story on there. I've had other people like me that were an engineer and became an entrepreneur and explained how they did it. And then inventors kind of sort of are engineering entrepreneurs themselves, even if they don't have an engineering degree. So all of these things was the reason. I just didn't find a podcast like that. And at the same time, I knew it would be a great lead magnet marketing effort. It would all tie into SEO, right? It's all, the more you get your name out there and show credibility, the better chance you have of people finding you and realizing, you're a good person to hire. So that was the reasons I did it. I never really actually thought of it as like an actual revenue source, and it really hasn't been. I have actually had some sponsors now. I've got the audience large enough to get some, but it's still just kind of a break-even thing. But like I said, the main reason was just because I kind of wanted to, and I knew the value of podcasting. Like it's just going to become bigger and bigger. I think when consumers want to listen to something very specific to what they're interested in, and podcasting is the best way to do it, because you can pick almost any topic you want and find a podcast on it. At least now, 5 years after I started mine. I mean, pick anything and you can find it,
I wonder though, if you've had clients that you've now worked with who prior to that paid engagement got to know you because of your content. I would assume.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I've had people come to me and said, hey, I found your podcast and I was interested in inventing stuff, and you answered a ton of my questions on how does it work and how do I get a patent and how does 3D printing work and all of these things. And it's like, hey, here's my project, let's do business. Absolutely has been the case.
How much does it cost if I'm an inventor and I've got this idea? How much does it cost to get plans and a prototype design? I mean, I know this can vary wildly,
yeah, absolutely,
but what are some examples of some things that you've produced, and what's the general price point for those?
Right. So if it's a relatively simple product, and what I mean by that is like no moving parts, or maybe two total parts with one movement, like a hinge, that typically runs around $500 for the design time, and maybe $200 or $300 for the prototype. So under $1,000. You get into like 2 or 3 moving parts, maybe some electronics are involved, and it's a little more complicated. It can go up from there to $3,000. I think the biggest project I ever did was sort of this remote control vacuum cleaner thing a long time ago for pets, and it was like $10,000 because it was extremely, like 20, 30 parts in there. It took 50 hours of design to get it all done, and it was 50 hours of printing. So yeah, that was an expensive one.
Yeah. So what's your sweet spot in terms of like kind of your ideal product to work on or design?
Well, at this point, I've done so much, I feel comfortable with almost anything, but most people come up with ideas that are, let's say, reasonable for their budget. I've had people come to me, for example, and say, well, I want to make a brand new car. I said, listen, that's great, but let's be realistic here. There's a reason there's only like 4 or 5 manufacturers in the world, and they have thousands of engineers working on it. Even if I could design the whole car myself, it would take me a lifetime to do it. Like, we have to stick with, and you can never afford it anyways. It's going to cost you millions of dollars up front to produce this vehicle. Like, a better thing is for an individual inventor is like, I don't know if you heard of the drop stop. I was just thinking of car products from Shark Tank. That was a great invention. Something totally I could do. I didn't do that one, but it was basically like a little thing that shoves in between your seat and the center console. So when you drop something, it doesn't go on the floor, like your phone or something. You drop it.
I own 2 of those.
Right. That was a great product.
And it was the one that was on Shark Tank.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, exactly. It was on Shark Tank. And so, stuff like that, they have to, like, a consumer can afford that. Okay. I'm sure their engineering costs are a couple thousand or whatever for that. Their upfront tooling costs a couple thousand. Like, that's very realistic for an individual inventor to do. And like, unless you have incredibly deep pockets, like, that's the kind of stuff that I think people really should try to come up with. And certainly I've done more complicated ones. The one that I got on Shark Tank my client for there was the egg mazing, which is basically this Easter egg decorating contraption that's like 2 pieces of plastic with a motor in there, and you put the egg on it, push a button, and it spins it, and then you just take a little pen and it puts concentric lines. Like, so you take a red pen, you put it on there, it draws a line, you take a pink one next to it, and it makes all these patterns. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
A little more involved, but certainly not, too crazy, but it was really a big hit. And the guy wore an Easter bunny outfit on the show, and loved it, and he got investment. And I thought that was pretty cool that I, did all the CAD design and prototyping for him.
Yep, I'm looking at it right now on Amazon. Hey, one last thing, Scott, that I know that just in terms of like engaging with you, you're a fan of the concept of quote velocity. What does that mean?
Yeah, so this is something I heard on the Tropical MBA not long ago, and I think this is why maybe I've had as much success as I've had, especially like with platforms like Upwork or Thumbtack, where I'm competing with other professionals for the work. Is I just make it really easy for the client, right? I have a conversation. I've got general pricing in mind. Like I just already gave you examples of, I know about what it's going to take to produce something. So I can give a person a quote in a day, 2 days, a couple days at the most. And that's what I mean by quote velocity. I just say, hey, here's what it is, and I'm ready to roll. I don't drag it out. I make it easy. I basically make it easy as possible for someone to hire me. And I think that's been a really good thing that I've done. And I don't know, maybe other people don't do that quite as well.
So the name of your podcast, and again, maybe any other ways that people would be a great front door to engage with you. Of course, they could just look it up, is the Engineering Entrepreneur Podcast. And of course, whatever podcast directory you're listening to this show in, you can find it right there. And any other things that people would probably want to look for in terms of like their first step to engaging with you?
Yeah, just go to my website. I have an introduction video there. I'm in the video. I show some of the printers and projects I've done. I've got tons of pictures on the website. I've got a blog in there where I've written, I don't know, probably over 100 articles of different things I've created myself, different inventions I've made, or, client ones that I'm allowed to show, if they've already gone to market. There's a lot of non-disclosures, so some things I can't discuss. But yeah, there's tons of information there. My email's right on there, info@caddesignhelp.com. If you want to contact me directly, it's right on the website. And it's easy to find me there.
Sounds great. Well, Scott Tarcy, you are the owner of CADdesignhelp.com. You're an inventor, engineer, and of course, the host of the Engineering Entrepreneur. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Thanks, Josh.